Alright guys, today's video is going to be on getting the REST server set up so that you can actually do some backup. So for those of you that might have been like keeping track of some of the things I've been working on, I've been trying to find a good backup solution for Unraid. It's unfortunate that, there's a lot of things for backing up to Unraid, but there's not that many for backing up from Unraid that's at least like easy and intuitive or, doesn't require like a whole lot of like hassle. And I say that even though this is going to be a bit of a hassle, but like once you get this set up, then like from that point forward, everything's so nice and easy, GUI, or sorry, UI, because UI is the new word we use right now, GUI. But nice UI, everything, and then you'll be able to like handle all your backup stuff, right? I tried, your backup, our clone, stuff like that, and like Restic. Go over here, right? Restic seems to have been the best one. Restic itself is like mostly command line, but there is a UI that was made on top of it that I really enjoyed, which is Backrest, which we'll get into in a second. But yeah, this video is going to be on getting the REST server set up, and there's going to be two main parts. There's going to be the SSL certs and then the actual setup, right? So let me just start off with this, right? So there is, right, a way to get this all set up and like enable like insecure mode and whatnot, right? Because you have to set up insecure stuff for the REST server and then for your actual client in order for all that to work. To me, it was actually a little bit more of a hassle than what I appreciated, especially since like in the end that also meant that I couldn't like kind of lock it down like I would have liked anyway. So that's why I decided not to even bother with that, and we're just going to actually set it up the right way, which is going to be by creating our own SSL certs. So about these SSL certs. So I've never messed with the SSL certs up until I started this, and it was a really nice thing to learn because the learning curve isn't like that crazy, but just conceptually trying to understand how it works was quite an enjoyable thing to go through. So just to give you guys a quick rundown, because this is going to be important. Okay, so for Restic needs these SSL certs in order to function properly, right? Things need to be actually authenticated, and preferably you do want MTL to be, to be employed, which is mutual trust, which I'll go into that in a second. But an SSL cert, right? So what is it, right? So an SSL cert, all it is that it's a way for something to identify itself, as well as to also let that entity know where it's supposed to be able to find this, okay? Which will make a little bit more sense later on when we're actually making it. But you want to think of an SSL cert as something that tells somebody who you are and where you could be found at, which is like the URL name or the IP address, right? That this is it, right? So that's why I can't just take this SSL cert and then just just give it to any other random device if that device isn't also at the appropriate locations it's supposed to be at in terms of like where I'm reaching it at, right? As far as the IP address or host name. So that's why this is important. So there are two levels to this, right? There's making these for devices, and then there's making these for individual entities, right? You can keep it simple and then just make it for a particular device, and then you just share that cert on that device with the applications running on that device. I'm sure a lot of people probably do that, and that's fine if and only if the application is accessible at the same location that you would access the device. So for example, let's say like the server I'm running the Restic server thing on, right? I can get to it using this URL, okay? If I am not going to use that URL in order to also get to this application, which for most Docker applications, it's your server's URL, IP address, and then a port number, right? If it's something different, then this is not going to work. And it just so happens for me in particular, my setup, which is optional, you don't have to do this. My actual Restic REST server Docker container is on its own IP address, so it's not even I don't even get to it through my through my server, through my Unraid server. But I'll show a little bit of that later. But that's where, you know, level 2 comes in, right? So you make your certs for your devices, and then you also make your certs for your individual applications where appropriate, right? I want to say this is the more recommended way in the, you know, in the world anyway, I think, right? Don't quote me on that, but that's that, right? And now here's the thing that we also need to also do. Okay, and that's the CA certs. I know I wrote optional, but actually for that's just because, you know, you can always just do the insecure stuff, but this isn't actually optional. You do have to do this. So, and I'm gonna show you why in a moment. But you do need to make your CA certs in order to employ mutual trust, because Restic does require a mutual trust setup. So again, right, the Restic server TLS thing requires a mutual trust setup, which we'll go into in a second, right? But the CA cert, right? So what's the CA cert? So your CA cert, CA standing for, I believe, a certificate authority, right? Just think of you like your centralized a device is your device that centralizes the creation of all certificates for all your devices that you own are going to be accessed. Okay. This is how, you know, two devices that provide their certificates to each other is how they know they're able to trust this device being what it says it is, without actually knowing, you know, anything else about it, because it would have actually checked to see if that certificate was also created by a CA, a certificate authority that it trusts. That's why, you know, CA cert was going to have, you know, who the, you know, the CA cert, the CA authority, the CA is, as well as who you're able to trust, because you know that certificate came or was made by this particular CA. Okay, and it's actually really easy. You know, I thought it was going to be super complicated to get a CA set up, but it's actually, it's simple, right? It's as simple as just creating a simple SSL. The only thing is, if you want to do this right, I believe the general recommendation online is that, from what I read, is that you want your CA to be a device that isn't online as much. It just so happens for me in particular, I have a server that I do keep off the network a lot, because I don't even like keep it on most of the time. So that's the one we're going to use for our CA cert. But of course, you know, this can be anything. This could be your Windows computer, it can be a laptop, your same server that you're about to run it on. It's just that the most important thing is that the cert and the key that you create, you need to absolutely lock those down. And you want to make sure that those do not get out into the hands of anybody, because then, of course, with the cert as well as the key, then they can create, you know, additional certificates that your devices are going to automatically trust because it would have made from this. And then the only way to fix that is you'd have to remake everything, right? So that's what that is, right? So let's actually, you know, it's much easier to understand as we go through it than it is explain it. So after we do the SSL certs, and then we'll actually go through the setups. So let's actually go ahead and start with the SSL certs. This is actually the first things I want to work with. Okay. So here I am on my server that I've chosen to, you know, do the CA stuff as well as create the certificates on. You know, the thing with Unraid is Unraid has OpenSSL already installed. So I believe I can do -v and boom, see, I already have OpenSSL. All right, so let's go ahead and go through this one step at a time. All this information I'll have in the description, so you'll be able to pull it out from there. Let me just kind of open these up a little bit. Oops, sorry, I forgot I had another monitor over here. All right, so first things first, right? And that is going to be, oh, would you look at that? It didn't do it. I don't know why, but there we go. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's just run through. I like to kind of explain most of the commands, that at least that I have a good understanding of, right? So, OpenSSL, right? That's the application thing we're using. Okay, this part here is just the specific algorithm we are using. This here is the algorithm that we are going to use in creating the CA cert, right? Because the first thing we need to do is we need to make our CA cert. So that's just what this part is. There's other different algorithms you can use. I want to say this was like I tried searching for like what was like, you know, the most complex or strongest one, blah blah blah, right? And I think I ended up with this one, but you know, like it could be others, especially by the time you even look at this, if you ever look at this. But noout, so dash noout just doesn't output no stuff in the console when you run this, so you just, you know, keep it clean. You don't need any extra information. And then of course we then create the CA key, right? And then, you know, in case you're not used to it, you know, the pound signs is a comment, and so like you can't actually just leave it in line like this and it won't actually do nothing. But let's go ahead and hit enter, right? And so now if I look, this should have made our CA cert, or sorry, our CA key, excuse me, right? So this is you know, I said this is the command to create the key, because you need to make your keys first before man, English is hard today. Keys first before you make your certs, and then we need to then actually make the actual certificate. So let's I'm actually grab it out the comment this time, just cause. All right, let's you know, I hate that. You know, if you accidentally like just you know, highlight something, this is considered a copy. Like, I know you can even, no, you can't even see it, but like if you accidentally highlight something, right, as you can see here, it'll copy it. So like sometimes I actually do that, and then this is after I already copied something, so then it kills my my clipboard, and I hate that. I really do hate that with a passion. Anyway, now let's go ahead and get to the actual cert making. So here we go, right? We're running this command here. This part here is how we're going to make our key, right? We're going to include our key in order to make our cert, right? This part here is the algorithm, right? You know, SHA-384. You know, how many days the cert is going to be good for? I want to say, I think this is 10 years, I think. Yeah, and that's that, right? And then the dash subject, right? This is just like bare bones information that we're going to include in the cert, which you know, the most mandatory thing is just going to be the CN, which is like the actual entity name of what the cert belongs to. So you want to, you know, you could word this whatever you want, but this is what you're calling your CA device, okay? So, you know, this could be like, you know, certificate publisher, root CA, or whatever, you know, home lab CA, whatever you want to call it, right? But that's what you need to have here, okay? And then we're gonna go ahead and hit hit enter, and there we go. Right now we have made our key and we have made our cert, okay? There are some applications and stuff that might also require the key. You want to look at those extra suspiciously, because like I say, you know, once you have the cert and the key, you can sign anything and make it seem like it came from that device, which is a big no. So do be skeptical if something's asking you for your key. It's usually the device key that it wants, not your actual CA key. So just keep that in mind. I just thought it'd be important to like point that out. Okay, so now that we made our CA, that's it, right? You see, you already made your CA. There go your CA key, your CA cert, just like that. Everything's all fine and dandy now. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to get into making your actual certificate for your application. Now, remember what I said, right? You know, under most circumstances, you can make it for just the server itself, and then you can share those certs with the applications if that's what you want to do. But, you know, it's probably better for you to actually make a cert specifically for each application. At least in my mind, you know, maybe I'm wrong about that, but that's what I did. So, because, you know, I'm doing these demonstrations, I won't actually use these because I had, you know, did just that and made specific certs for the applications. But it's good that I at least still show you this anyway. So here we go, right? So again, here go the algorithm. One thing I do want to point out too, since this is now going to actually be used by a device or application, is that especially for old devices, like I had this issue with one of my QNAP servers that are like, I think on an ARM CPU. This is a no-go. It doesn't like this algorithm. I had to use like a less intensive algorithm. I think it was a SHA. I don't remember. I'm drawing a blank. I have to look at my notes. But just keep in mind, right? If you make these certs and then for whatever reason the application does not like it, or the device itself does not like it, it says it's invalid or something, it is likely because it does not support or cannot handle the algorithm you use to make the key. And you're just going to have to either do some research. Hopefully you can find it relatively quickly, or you're just gonna have to just randomly pick and choose, and hopefully you find one relatively quickly that works, right? Because there is a lot of algorithms that you can choose when making your search. So just keep that in mind, right? That's important. Same noout thing, so we don't need to worry about that. And here we go, right? Just like before, right? We're making the key specifically for the device. So just imagine this is for the Restic server itself, right? Not the Unraid server. I could do this for the Unraid server and then share that with the application, but for all intents and purposes, you need to just imagine me making this for the application itself, because that's how I wanted to do it. So cool, we made the key, and then here go the CSR file. The CSR file, I'm not gonna like dive too deep into it. All it is just it's part of the creation process for certificates. And all it's going to have is just like just some information that it needs to know in order to be able to actually make your certificate. I'm gonna talk about the configuration file in just a second. Let me just go ahead and just get this part out the way at least. But as you can see, we're using the key, and then we're creating the CSR file, and then we're using our configuration file, which I'm going to talk about in the next command here. That's right. I'm sorry, I forgot to even copy it. Right. Yeah, I forgot to copy it here. So 1 second. All right. So I'm just going ahead and copying where I have that configuration file at, because I forgot to move it to, the directory I'm working out of. So, I know this looks a little weird. It's just because I got spaces in my directory names. I like to practice taboo, sure. And then of course, when you do your CP, if you do the period at the end, so whatever you need to copy, period at the end, and that tells it to copy those files to the directory that you're in. So that's what we did. And, boom, right? So we did that, and now that we actually have set a configuration file, now we can make it just fine without no issues here. Boom, right? Configuration file is there. All right, now let's actually talk about the configuration file. Let me just go ahead and stage this next command in a second here, because I want to talk about the command and then go into the configuration file. All right, so we made our CSR file, which is what we're going to need in order to make the device certificate. So now let's get to it, right? And so let's go ahead and go into here. So this part right here, right? So this is us bringing in that CSR file that we made. Like I said, that's needed because it has like important request information that needs to be made, right? -ca, which I realized because we were in the CA Cert. Just wanted to make sure. Okay, so -ca is how you're going to specify the CA certificate that we made earlier, right? Which is why I had that here. The CA key, right? So, because remember, we need the key. We do need the key and the cert in order to make this certificate, because then that's how like other devices are going to know if that certificate is made by this particular CA, because it's, do that whole reverse lookup stuff. But, then we got here CA create serial. This is a required flag. I believe on the back end, it makes like serial numbers for every certificate that you're making, and some list or something. But you do need this. And then we output the certificate. We specify it for 730 days. You can set this however long or however short you need. In fact, I think Google, and there's some rumor going on that like Google is going to be like requiring that it, good certs don't, I guess, extend past like 2 years or a year or something like that. I think a year. I don't know. I just heard a story. Don't mind me. I'm just rabbling now. But then we got this here, which is going to be part of our configuration file, extensions v3_rec. That's an important part for our configuration file that we're about to go into, which is what we're specifying. So now let's talk about this configuration file. Now, if you remember, okay, when I made that CA cert, right, all I did was just specify that subject, the CN name, right? Which is, like I said, that's the quick, bare bones, easy way you can do it, right? Now, if you want it to be a little bit more advanced, and this is more recommended because it lets you, keep better tabs on like what has what when you need to go and make changes or you need to update some certificates, is you want to use a configuration file. So now, when OpenSSL is going through your configuration file, my understanding, I can be slightly wrong on this, so maybe a couple of parts. If I am, please put the comments in the section so I can, you know, see where I was wrong at, and then that way I know, right? Or, you know, everybody else is watching this will know, right? But my understanding is that like OpenSSL by default will process the rec section, okay? And that's going to, you know, that's where this would have probably typically have been at from what I saw. But what we did is that we created some variables. Just think of, you know, this is probably makes sense for people that have some programming background. You'll know what I'm saying. But what we just basically did was we made some variable names, right, where we assigned it to different sections of the configuration file. So as you can see here, distinguished name, we assigned it to the rec, which is this part here. And so like what it does is OpenSSL will process this, and then for each thing that it's processing, so if this distinguished name is going to look at this and say, oh, it needs to equal this, so I need to go find this, and then it's going to find it here, and then it's going to be, oh, okay, so there's all these different things I need to add, right? So that's what that is. That's what yeah, that's what all that is, right? So this part right here, now this is where it gets important, but first let me actually talk about these in case you guys understand, right? This and this is usually like the standards. You don't necessarily need this part, but I just added it anyway, right? But CN, right, the CN is the name of the device or entity that is using the certificate, right? So I called it, you know, device 1 in this particular demonstration, right? O is going to be the organization that this certificate belongs to. So you do need to make sure that this matches the organization, you know, across like all your other certs if you want to, you know, things to be consistent and don't look a little crazy. And then the OU, which stands for organization unit, you know, this is where like, you know, if you was making this for your server, you'd put server. If you're making this, I don't know, for a Windows computer, or you could say PC or something, not, you know, just like I said, this is optional. You probably typically don't see this, but you know, if you want to add it, sure. And here we go, right? The v3 rec, right? So and you know, in that command where I added this, right, this is telling OpenSSL that you need to especially process this part of the configuration file, right? Which when we go in this configuration file, it's the same thing like up top, right? I make a variable and give it the alt names, which is down here. Now you might be wondering what this @ sign is, and it took me a second to understand. So my understanding, and if I am a little bit off, because I feel like I'm really close, but I could be off of maybe some things, just let me know in the comments, right? My understanding is that when you do it like this tells OpenSSL that when it parses this, it's going to parse this as just simple key value pairs, nothing really special about it, right? If you know my guys with programming like background, you know key value pairs are, right? So this is key, so you know CN, access CN, right? I'll get this value out when I'm looking at the cert, blah blah blah, right? The @ what it does is it tells it that when you go to parse this, you need to create separate, it's like some separate SAN entries for this certificate, with this information included in here. So this is going to be more than just key value pairs. It's like SAN, like separate SAN entries, okay? And this is important, like I said, because I was having issues trying to like without it, just to, you know, test it out and whatnot. But this is important because like this is the other part of the SSL cert that talks about where you're supposed to find this device at, right? How I know this device is legitimate if not only does the name matches, but the location it is currently at is, you know, it matches up as well. So as you can see here, I got 2 DNS names and then the IP address. All right. So if you look here, right, you know, most people probably might only have one, and then if you have multiple IP addresses, you can do just follow this example here, DSN1, DSN2, right? And then all this is just like, this is the host name that you can access the device from. So just for example, that would be like, you know, the name, right? So this would be the URL that you use to get to your server. If you're hosting this in the World Wide Web, right, this is going to be the actual domain name that you can access this. And do keep in mind, right, if you use subdomains, right, and you want to just keep it simple, I believe the standard is just you can use a wildcard, right? You can just do star that if you want, if you know, maybe like this stuff changes from time to time or something. I don't know. But you know, you could just specify, you know, if you specify the domain name, right, you just give it that. Oh man, gotta spell that right? Backup dot, then your domain name, and then boom, that's it, right? And then the nice thing is that because you're specifying more than one, right, this can be the one you use for the World Wide Web, right? So this .com, or just that, right? If you don't use the .com. And then this could be for your own internal network. So you like say, you know, this could be like whatever name you actually call it inside your home network. That's all fine and dandy. And then IP address, same thing, right? You know, you can give it the IP address for like your local network if you have it static. If you don't have it static and everything's dynamic, you probably shouldn't even like include this, because this will probably never match up, since you know IP addresses in the World Wide Web change periodically anyway, unless you obviously have you paid for a static or whatever. But that's to say that only one of these need to match up when your device is being accessed or being, talked to. Okay. So it's not that, the IP address and the host name need to match, right? Or maybe, well, it wouldn't make sense that both these host name matches at the same time, right? But you get what I'm saying, right? You just need one of these to be true when you're accessing your device, and then the certificate pass with flying colors. Yay, certificate. Okay, so boom. So that's how that works. That's how that configuration. I'll have that like template thing in the description. So just keep a lookout for that. But that's what we're doing when we run this command, right? Get that special section that I want, and then we're going to make, include that, in that configuration file, and then boom, there we go, right? Certificate request, self-signature, okay. And then it made that beautiful, right? So now if I look at my things I made, right? So as you see, we made the certificate. This is what we're going to use for the REST server. Okay. Not this specifically, but, just bear with me, right? Then of course, we have the key that is part of the REST server that we need to include with it. And then, protect this. You don't need this going in. You usually don't need this going anywhere. And if anything's asking you for it, be highly skeptical. But then of course, we need the CA Cert, right? So you need these three things in order for the REST server to work without an issue, right? Like I said, as you can see, making the certificates was like pretty easy. No issue there. The only thing you just need to just remember, right, is that when you are making your certificates for the rest of your devices, make sure you're using the same exact CA Cert and CA key. That's why it's important that this is in a centralized location, right? That you got this protected, and there's no funny business going on. And so now let's go ahead and let's talk about permissions, okay? Because this was a thing that I kind of ran into an issue with later on, right? So if you actually look at, if I do ls-l, okay, so these certs, they're all owned by root, and some of these have a read and write with nothing else, and then some of these also have like all like read and writes all together, right? So this is a problem, because what this means is that you should be able to copy your you'll be able to copy your cert, but you might have issue with your key. Excuse me, you might have issues with your key. And this is only on this device, okay? This is not when you're getting ready to move it to your other devices. So meaning that you need to change these permissions if you want to be able to move them. Otherwise, you're just going to get a error, right? So I believe, let me just refresh this, make sure, right? So these were all of the things that I just made, right? So if I take the key for the REST server, the certificate, and then I take the CA certificate that is also going to need, okay? If I sit here and I go and I copy this and I try to paste it, right? As you can see, I was able to copy the certificates, but not the key, okay? So you see, so that's a huge problem. And I know I just said earlier that you needed your CA cert. I'm sorry, you just need the REST server certificate and key. You don't need the CA cert physically on this. You need it for the device or the entity that's making the connection to the REST server, which we'll get into that later. Okay. But so what we're going to need to do is it's going to be real easy. Just go ahead and just change the ownership to nobody, and then change the permissions so that everybody can read and write. This is temporary. This is just so you can move these files. After you move these files, you need to redo, then just reset these lockdown restrictions. Okay, so as you see, I just sat there and I copy and pasted that there. I ran it, and then there we go. See, nobody owns any of these files. Okay, and they're all read and write. So fantastic. So now we should be able to copy the key. Should be able to copy the key here without a problem. Excuse me, I am tired. As you guys can see, it's 2:30 in the morning, almost 2:30 in the morning. I am getting tired here. But boom, all right, we made the certificate and key. Okay, and so this was me copying it onto the server that I'm going to have the REST server running on, so that I can have access to it. So then what I would have done is I would have then gone over here onto my REST server, wherever server I'm using to run the REST application. Okay, and then I would have copied it into the directory that the REST server is operating out of, which it'll make more sense when I actually just go to it. So let's go over here. Actually, let me just kind of take it from the top here. So we're moving on now to installing the REST server, right? So what is this thing called? I'm sorry, guys. I am like, no, it is just called REST server. It's just a pain because it's, Restic, and it's just the REST server. I don't know why they didn't just call it the Restic server, See, Restic, REST server. So quite a tongue twister. But, I see it. Just go to your apps, apps, search for Restic, boom, hit install, and then it'll take you to the thingamabob over here, right? So now let's actually talk about the stuff here. Let me go ahead and put advanced view. All right, I left most stuff default, sort of. My Docker container, at least this one particular, has its own custom IP address, which I'll talk about in a second. But host name and then this, okay? So this is optional. You don't need to do this. However, I like to do this just because by setting the host name, this is what is going to identify the Docker container on the network. Okay, and this is only particularly important when you're using a custom IP address. Okay, so in case you was wondering, if you want to give your Docker containers custom IP addresses, this is how you do it. You set the network type to custom. For some people, for whatever reason, your stuff is botched and you might not have this, which in that case, you'll need to jump in the terminal and actually create it. It's not necessarily all that complicated, but like it can get a little finicky at times. The most important thing, which I'm just going through this just in case for those of you that might, might worry about it or whatever. I think it's over here, right? Yeah, over here. Is you just want to make sure that you check this to yes, right? Because this is off by default. Check this to yes, so that way it doesn't, when you create, if you do have to like create it yourself, it doesn't then delete it once you restart your, if your server ever restarts or whatever. Okay. But, let's say set the custom, give it a specific IP address. Again, this is optional. You don't have to do this. Okay. I just like to do this because I like the access. I like the URL wise, I like to access stuff specifically for the, for the backup. Okay. So that's what this is here. I tried doing this without it, thinking that, DHCP was going to kick in. It doesn't work, or at least for me, it didn't work. So maybe you might be able to get it, I don't know, but I had to specify an IP address. And now as a bonus, okay, how do I make sure that this IP address then isn't like eventually assigned on my router? Well, I'm using OpenWart, so you might have to like mess around with your, your particular router's implementation that hands out IP addresses. But for me, what I did was, on OpenWart, I just went in OpenWart, you know, go to network, DHCP, and then go to the what is it, static leases tab. And then what I just did is I created a static lease entry for my you know, that Restic server backup I made, and then I selected the IP address. And then if you notice, I didn't give it a MAC address, and this is something you can do in OpenWart. Now, I don't know if this works fully, in that this will prevent it from using the IP addresses. I believe it does. I've never had an issue, but I've never tried to like exhaust the IP address range to see if I can force it to still try to use it. But my understanding is that with these static lease entries, this will prevent the IP address from naturally being assigned when it does it, I think. Okay, like I said, I haven't extensively, you know, tried it, or, you know, tried exhausting it to give it tested in all extreme cases. But like I said, you know, just give it a name. I leave the MAC address blank, and then I specify the IP address that I'm giving it, right? And I like to do it this way because then, at least on my network, you know, my router, I can look at all the IP addresses that I have, not only just for the Docker containers that I've manually assigned, but for the rest of my network, right? So that obviously I know like what I have available to use and what I don't. So, all right, let me go back to the application here. So yeah, so that's what that is. Again, I know I spent a little bit of time on that, but you know, I like to show everybody so that way in case if you have any bright ideas, you kind of know what, you know, have a little bit of information to help you decide what it is you want to do. Everything else is more or less defaulted regarding the data directory and the port. This data directory is where your backups are going to be saved at, which, you know, that's the location I put it at for me. And then we have the additional REST server flags. Like I said, I'll have the link. I have the link for this so that you guys can basically go through and pick what you want and what you don't want. As a quick rundown for what I have, right? -- private repos. Okay, this prevents your backups. This prevents like any client that's connecting to your server to be able to just back up at whatever directory it wants to. This forces it to specify the directory of the name that has to have the name of the entity that's connecting to your server. So for example, like since I'm going to use my Theta V server to back up to that REST server, right? That means that when I make my connection, the directory has to have this name, has to have the name, the username, the Theta V name, in its directory starting off in order for this to work. If it doesn't, then it'll fail. Okay. So that's that. I can close that because I don't need that anymore. That's that. Another reason why I like the REST server is because they have built-in Prometheus metrics inside of it, which you enable by using this flag. And then since I have a separate device that does the scraping and authentication to like my Grafana cloud and whatnot, I made sure to also add the no authentication thing from Prometheus, so that way it's accessible without an issue. And then here we go. Right now we're getting into the important parts of this. All right, so -- TLS is how you enable the TLS. Like I said, this is required, otherwise Restic like tends to have issues. I think there's a repositories of empty passwords, right? I believe like you'll have an issue with this and something else. I don't remember off the top of my head, but that's why you need to enable TLS. And then of course you can't enable TLS without your certs, right? So now this is where, come on, I wish it didn't move whenever I just move away from this. So this is where now you specify your certs, right? So you enable TLS -- TLS, then you'll do TLS - cert, and then you give it the directory that you had moved your certs to, which as you can see here, right? Since you got to remember, right? So this is going to be internal to this application. So even though I had moved my cert here, this is not the directory I give this, right? I give it what it would look like if I was inside my container trying to get to it, which is this /data path. Okay. So God, man, why do they do this? Why do they design it like this? So that's for the cert as well as the key, as you can see here. So same thing with the key, because that's where I copy them at. So /data and then the certain key. And then, for me, I set the minimum version 1.3 latest, that's like extra stuff. You don't really need to do that. And I want to say, yeah, that's it, right? So that's it for that. Then you hit done, and then it'll establish it. It should work without no issue. Let me see. Do I have any logs here? And oh yeah, from like earlier when I was testing some stuff out. Oh yeah, as a matter of fact, let me actually we got to go into the next part here, which is going to be the console. So hold on. Oh no, it just remade it. Okay, cool. So as you see, now this part you do have to do. So now this next part here is you're going to go into your server, and you're going to need to create the user that is all the users that are going to connect to this application, to this server. Okay. So that means for every device, you have a username and password that you are using to create it. So let me actually show you guys, because I have to remake it anyway. .http file. Okay. Now look, there is some kind of flag somewhere that lets you specify the I don't know if it's here. Oh yeah, it is right here, right? So you see the HTTP file. If you know how to work with this, by all means, go ahead and do it. I believe this is like defaulted in NGINX. Like I think how that application uses it or whatever. I'm gonna tell you right now, unless you're a professional at that, don't waste your time. It is very very non-user friendly, and I didn't like it. But just so you guys can see, right, what this looks like. If I go into this file, oh, that's right, it'd be actually, would help if I specify the directory. Okay. So in this file, you're going to see the users you made and then their passwords. Okay. Now, the thing is that this uses some special hash algorithm thing or whatever. And that's why, you can't just necessarily just make this file by hand and then just specify it, unless of course, how the file is actually made using whatever application, and then you do it. But I wanted to show you guys that just so that you saw it. And then what we're going to do is I am going to obviously remove that, because I don't use any of those things no more. So let me just remove it. Cool. So now it doesn't exist no more. Can I show? Yeah, cool, right? It's gone. Okay, and then as you can see here, I have the key certificate. Like I said, I didn't need to have the CA Cert there, but that's when I was doing some testing earlier just to see something. But yeah, so now let's actually talk about why we're even in here in the first place, right? You need to create your user, right? And since we don't know how to actually mess with this, by default, we are going to create the user like this here. All right, so you're going to run this command, create user, and then you're gonna give it the username and password. Now, let me tell you something here that's going to be very, very important, okay? Otherwise, you'll be pulling your hair out for hours, not understanding why it's not working, and you'll hate me for it, okay? So, as you see here, I am making a create user. I'm making the user. So this is the username, right? Which for me, for that server, it's going to be this, the V, and then password, right? Now, I don't know what special characters it doesn't like. I would have to look it up. But let me tell you something, okay? Because I have passwords that use all kinds of special characters, like the @signs, $signs, right? Asterisks, all this good stuff, right? Numbers. And this, if I use that, it will create the user without a problem. The password will look like, it'll look like what we just saw earlier with this stuff here. So it'll look like all things are normal, but authentication wise, you'll never get through the authentication. And it has something to do with the special characters. I don't know what special characters it does not like, but just for this example, I am going to just give it a simple, let me just do a temp 101, right? You'll have to experiment to see. Like I said, it'll be real quick and easy because you can always just nuke the file and then just, try a different combination until you get it working. But, we'll just do that. Cannot modify the use -c to create. Oh, because I deleted the file. My bad, G. My bad. Like I say, you wouldn't even have this issue to begin with, because you know, you wouldn't have been messed with this earlier. But let me just make this real quick. Data slash this here. I don't know why it's like having such an issue, but it's okay. So now let's see if this works without a problem. Like I say, you shouldn't have that issue. You should be able to just create the user without a problem. Well, see, see, there we go. All right, cool. It made it without a problem. So there we go, right? We made our user, we made the password, and then that's it. Now, everything from this point forward is going to be all mostly UI, I believe. I can't think of anything that's going to be like needing any more console, because, you know, I hate the console. But that's that. Now, let's go ahead and jump to our server that we're going to be backing up now. So I'm going to go ahead and just like before, right? Let's go ahead and jump into apps, search for Restic, and then we're going to then implement our application that we're using. Okay, so let's go ahead. Let's go to Restic. Let's see, you know, a lot of people, I'm sure, I don't know why, but you know, you use your Restic, you know, it's all command line stuff. If you're all about that nice command line stuff, you go right ahead. I tried actually a couple of UIs, and then the Backrest one, which happens to be natively available, right, is probably the best one that I've like messed with. So we're going to go ahead and install. So, you know, this is just extra information we'll talk about later. You ain't got to worry about too much about that. But let's go ahead and go down here, go down the motions. So let me go ahead and run through. Okay, so everything more or less is going to be defaulted. You don't have to change any of this stuff. I'm just doing it just because I just, you know, I have a particular way how I like my things set up. So don't mind me. Like instead of IP, I like to actually like have it use the server name, because I hate seeing the IP address in my web browser. Don't mind me there. You know, I leave everything else defaulted, with the exception of the you know, where the defaults are, right? Because I have a specific Docker drive that I use to you know, install these Docker containers. So I'm gonna just put all that here just real quick. Like I said, this you don't have to change any of this unless this is, you know, what you need to do. So Docker containers, okay? Docker containers do not have inherent access to all your files and stuff. So you do need to mount, which is what this is doing. You do need to mount those directories to your Docker container, right? So that's what this is doing. The way I like to do it, again, you can do it however it is you feel is the best to do it. Okay, is the first thing I like to do is I'll create, you know, at the root directory, I'll make the name of my server that I'm using to do the backup, that, you know, that I'm going to be backing up. And then as far as the host paths, I would then begin to mount them to that directory, right? So I would start with whatever is like the most top level directory that I'm going to back up, which, so like, for example, if I was going to do you know, the mount path, which, you know, he has all your containers and whatnot, that's all cute and stuff. If I was going to do the flash drive, you know, the home directory, right, all that stuff, you know, I would do it. And then the thing is, unfortunately, with this Docker implementation, you know, you have to do a separate entry for each one. Okay, so like, for example, if I was going to do the flash drive as well as the stuff in my array, I would first do this, right? I would select boot, right? And then I would just make sure that I add that folder as the container path, right? So that way it matches with like the directory structure, because otherwise what'll happen is that, you know, if you have a particular place you want to back up, only need to back up, it can get confusing with respect to like what exactly you're backing up from where, if you don't keep the structure at least similar so you understood. So like when I go inside this container, I'd be like, okay, you know, this boot directory matches with the boot directory on the actual server, so I can actually, you know, verify what it is I'm backing up and whatnot. So just keep that in mind, right? Again, you know, however you want to do it, that's all perfectly fine. This is just important that you have that as is. And yeah, so just set it up how you want. What I'm going to do just for testing purposes here, I already have a specific directory we're going to be using, so I'm just going to add that. What is this? Users, it is production, and was it just backup? Yeah, backup testing. This is what I want to use, just so that I can just use you guys as an example. Yeah, right. So container path is going to be here in this theater V. Like I said, I would have also had the rest of the directory match, but I'm just leave it be for right now. Access mode. Now, here's the thing. Okay. Now this is going to be super important. You need to understand this. All right. So recommendation, right, is you're going to leave this as read only. So that way, in case anything goes haywire with the application doesn't then begin deleting or messing up the stuff on the directory, right? Because remember, right, especially if you're going to be like backing up things like the flash drive and whatnot, you don't want weird things happening where like you do something and you accidentally overwrite the flash drive. Okay. So I'm going to leave this as read only. Now, the only issue with this is just going to be that when you need to restore something, it is not going to work, because obviously it's going to complain that the whatever file you're trying to restore back to that location now is a read-only location, right? So it's not going to work, right? So what you're going to do, you could do that one of two ways. You could either back it up to a different directory that you're going to have as read and write, right? So for example, like I could have in that same location that I am backing up, that, not backing up, for example, right? I could have like a recovery folder that I give access to, that I make it read and write. So that way, if I need to recover something, I can recover it into that folder specifically. And then myself, I can then like manually copy over if that's what you want to do. Or the other thing you can do is just that when it comes time where you have to recover something and you identify that you do have it, you just go back to this container here, and then you just flip this to read and write, hit save, have it redo the container. All your configurations and stuff should be persistent, so it's not like anything goes missing. And then you go ahead, you restore your files, and then you come back, right? After you restore your files, you verify everything's good. You come back, change this back to read only, and then you're good to go, right? That's how you do it. For just our testing purposes here, we're just going to leave this as read only. I want to say that's it. Default port, all that's all fine and dandy. These are variables, so you don't really have to mess with these all too much. Time zone, do be sure to change this to your actual time zone. I hate that the world has decided on, this format of a time zone, because then I have to sit there and figure out what city I live the closest to. That is actually a valid selection in order to select the time zone, but that's just me rambling. And here is now the very important part that you must do. The CA Cert thing. Okay. Now let me tell you something, like my gripe with like these instructions, okay? Because all documentations are trash at the end of the day, okay? I just want you guys to know. The only reason why I even make these videos a lot of times is just because the documentation either doesn't exist or it's trash. So if you see here, we're under the REST server section here. I would have imagined that means that this flag belongs to the REST server. It does not, right? This is actually to the Restic itself, okay? In fact, if I come over here to the REST server, as you can see here, that flag doesn't even exist, right? And this is what was like messing me up for quite a long time. All right, that's my first gripe. The second gripe is that with Backrest, shout outs to the person that made this. The user interface, beautiful. I loved it. This is the reason why I'm using it. However, right, his documentation, also trash. Okay, if you want to sit there and you want to like figure out like the CA certs, figure out all trash. You're not gonna get anything out of this, right? You don't even know like how the configuration file is even put together, what's even available. Trash. Okay, so just keep that in mind. What you need to actually do, okay, is we're gonna go down here into our manual, and what we need to specify the CA cert file, because if we don't do this, then it's not gonna work. Okay, and I'm gonna show you what it looks like, so that way you have an idea of what it is. and then we will flip this on, and then you'll be good. But I'm gonna just stage it just so that way I could just come back and then just make the change I need. Okay, where I don't lost, see, maybe don't lose my thing here. But anyway, so let's go ahead and go to variable. So I'm gonna call this CA Cert, right? So this is going to point to wherever the CA certificate is when it's making the connection. Because remember, when this application, so when your Restic application makes its connection to the REST server, right, it is going to check the certificates it is using to see if it's certificates it can trust. And the only way it's going to be able to do that is if it has a CA cert that was used in creating those certificates. So you need to create this variable. You're going to do, this is important. So you need to, the key has to be this, all uppercase Restic _ CA Cert. And then the value is going to be the directory that you save the CA Cert at, right? So, kind of like what I was saying, right? Just make sure that you copy this wherever you're going to put it at, which, oh yeah, because I did just nuke that directory. I do need to redo that. So let me go ahead and actually show you guys. I want to say, let me just recopy this, make sure I didn't lose it. Where we put this? Where did we put this at? I think we really did just put this at /data. I am pretty sure we just put this at /data, right? Yes. Okay. Sorry guys, I had to, I gotta like double check and make sure that I'm doing this right, so that way I don't botch myself later. Like I said, I'm just doing like OCD level changes, so do ignore me at this part right here. But I am going to put it, yes, I will put it here in the /data. I think it's probably the best place I'm going to put it at. Okay. I just wanted to make sure I just decided on where I was going to put it at. So, container path, which, excuse me, variable key, Restic cert, say this is CA certificate, the CA cert, and then value, this is going to be here in /data /ca.cert. Right now, because I wanted to show you guys what this error looks like, I'm gonna temporarily jack it up. Cert, I'll just say fake, right? Boom. Okay, now all that else is good. Cool. So make sure you got your CA cert in that location. We're going to go ahead and hit apply. This should work without an issue. You see here, this is it like loading up. It's all loaded up perfectly fine. And cool. Okay, boom, right? You see it running. So what I need to do now real quick is I most certainly need to make sure that I am actually running said cert. You can pick wherever you want to put it at. Just make sure obviously it's inside the Backrest folder because it needs to be accessible with inside the container. Now what I'm going to do is let me just copy it real quick and okay, yes, so that is where I actually did have it. And boom, there goes CA Cert, right? Now, of course, I am going to just real quick change that permission there for this. Let me just get that out the way real quick. I want to LS. Cool. All right, that looks good to me. All right. And like I said, right, it doesn't actually even know that the cert's there because, like I said, I jacked up the name on purpose so you guys will actually be able to see it. Okay, yeah, I don't need this no more. Now let's go ahead and let's jump to the UI. All right, cool. So now the instance name, right? What are we calling this particular instance? I like to just give it the server name. I mean, I'm sure you can call it whatever it is you want. Disable authentication, just what it does is like when you load this up, if you wanted to go straight in, you could. And then, we're talking about backups. So probably not a good idea. So I'm gonna just go ahead and disable that. And then here we go, right? So here go the username and password, right? Because you're gonna create a user. Like I said, I'm gonna just stick with the same name, and then password, right, is just going to be whatever I need to use it. This is not. This does not have to be the same username and password that you use for the actual credentials, right? This is actually separate. This is strictly just trying to come into Backrest, okay? So I'm gonna just give this a password that I use. We're going to hit submit. All right, cool. And as you can see there, it's asking me to go ahead and sign in. So that's what I'm gonna do. And just make sure I'm just, you know, do a little something there. All right, fantastic. Okay, cool. So this is what Backrest looks like. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and go add the repo. And I'm going to give it the name of the server that I am backing up to, right? You can call it whatever you want, you know, main backup server. That way, you know, you make another one, you know, secondary backup server if you want to do like multiple backups. That was actually one of the reasons why I love the Restic implementation, because it also does this cool thing where like it saves you space if you use like multiple different locations, so that only one of those, I think, like has a copy or something like that. Don't quote me on that. I'm drawing a blank because it's now 3 a.m. So I am like a little bit fuzzy right now. But now let's actually go ahead and talk about the REST access. Okay. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to access our REST server. Okay. Now remember what I told you, right? I have that particular Docker container on its own IP address, own network name, right? So that's why it's like this instead of just like my server. You know, like I said, if you're doing it the normal way, server name or its IP address, right? And then the port that you use. Fantastic. Now, if you also remember, we did the -- private repo. And what that means is that, you know, whatever is the authentication that we're using when we make this connection, that username has to match the directory name that we're making this repository for. So that means that for this case, since as you saw earlier, we made the theta-v user, that means I need to make a theta-v directory, right? So this is an absolute must. Now let's talk about the password thing. You know, you can create this however you want, or you can, you know, save it. I'm sorry, excuse me. You know, you can like have it generate. This is just a repository password that is needed in order to be able to access that repository. You can just simply hit generate. All that's all fine and dandy. And now let's talk about these environmental variables, which we are going to find if I come back over here. Okay, so now let's actually go ahead and I think I do go back to this thing here. Yeah, right here. Let me go back to the REST server, and it's going to be these right here. Like I said, it'd be this, you know, these will be in the description. I said these are the variables that we're going to need. So let's go ahead and it's right here in my face, right? We're going to go ahead and establish that. Let me just copy the two here while I'm at it. So here, that is the what is it, right? The username, and then this is going to be the password. Okay, so you know it's key value pairs. So you know, key and then equal sign into the value. So like I say, you know, this needs to be the username. So that is the username. And then we're going to go ahead and then give it the password, which, what was it? I think it was like temp 101 because this is just a demonstration. Now let me just go ahead and, I don't even have to log up. That's fine. We'll get that in a second. All right. So now, you know, this is where you make your customizations, right? You know, your prune policy, how often you want this running, and for like pruning or deleting, you know, old backups or whatever. And then your check policy is like how often you want it to like do a scrub of like your backup to make sure that there's no files that were secretly corrupted or something. So that's where this is. And then my favorite part, of course, you know, you got your priority stuff. If you want to mess with that, go right ahead. I wouldn't do it. But my favorite part, the hooks, you know, if you use this stuff, cool. If you don't worry about it. But me, I use Discord. I do have a Discord server where, like, you know, I have a specific channel that has like my alerts that get sent to. And so like, this is where you could select, you know what conditions you want to be alerted about, which me, I like to do condition any error. So if there's ever any errors when this repository is like, you know, doing its thing, you know, feed it the webhook, which is super easy in Discord. I'm telling you guys, it's like, you know, very, very nifty and convenient. You know, any errors, then it'll send me a message, or, you know, it'll post a message in that channel with all of the, you know, summary information I need to do it. Now let's actually talk about they don't know that's the whole CA Cert thing, right? So before I do that, let me just pull up the log here just so I can show you guys what that looks like. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. That's it. You wouldn't see all that to begin with. So I'm going to hit test configuration. Okay. Oh, sorry. That's right, because we're not using that. But cool, right? All right, so cool. So we got to do it, and boom. As you can see here, it's having an issue with the TLS handshake, saying that it's a bad certificate. Now, as you saw, the log just says it's a bad certificate. So you would think that there's something wrong with the certificate itself. Maybe I used the wrong encryption algorithm or something, but actually it's just trash when it comes to like documentation and reporting, because once this is actually done, you'll actually see the real issue here, which is that it failed to verify the certificate signed by unknown authority. Right? That's the actual problem. And so that's why you're going to need your that CA cert that we was talking about, right? So now let's go ahead and put her see that damn thing where it just copies the console log. Oh my god, bro. So boom, I can do that, hit apply. Let that do its thing. Cool, it did it. And now let's go ahead and let's try it again. So if I do test connection, and there you go, connected successfully. There you go, see, it connected successfully, says no existing repo is found at this location. A new one will be initialized. Fan-freaking-tastic, okay? I'm gonna just disable all this just so that way I don't, if I forget, because I collapse from exhaustion, there'd be no issue. But let's go ahead and do it. Cool. We have the repo. Now let's go ahead and add our backup plan. So let me just call this a demo, nothing fancy there. Select the repository we just made. And now we're going to do our backup paths, right? So if I go here, remember I made the /theta-v, which, is going to have the directory of everything I want to back up. So I'm gonna just go ahead and just leave that be. And then we're going to do the excludes, right? So the excludes is how you're going to decide what things you don't want it to back up if you have specific file types or something. Because as you saw in the example, can I actually show you? Yeah, cool. Backup tester, right? I have a folder that says back me up and another folder that says don't back me up, which obviously I don't want it to back up. And then in here, I even have a what's it called, a file that I don't want it to back up, but I do have a file in here that I do want it to back up called file 0, right? So what we're going to do is let's go ahead and go to exclude, and we are going to exclude. We'll start off with the directory first. So we'll just add it. That's it. That's all you got to do. Now it won't back up that whole directory. And then as far as file types go, I don't want it to back up .bmp files, which is go over here, right? That's what this file type is, but ignore this type of file, right? Like I said, I could have specified that file directly, or I can just specify, file types as this particular file types I don't want it to do. Then how often I want the backup to run. I will say this is a bit trash. Admittedly, because I want to do it like every fourth Sunday of the month, for example. So I have no idea if that's even what this does, and I don't have the time to sit there and try to test it out. But on 4, I don't know what it is. I really don't know what it is, because it's already every month, and I have a selection for obviously there's not 22 Sundays. Or there's not, a 4th and a 22nd Sunday of the week, and then this is how you specify the time. So I don't even truly know how often it is. So you'll have to figure that out. Backup flags, I never messed with, so I ain't gonna bother with it. Retention, like I said, how many copies you want it to keep backed up at a time. I want to say that's what the pruning thing does, I think, right? You set this for how many you want it to do, or you want it to particularly keep, and then the prune, I believe, right? Don't quote me on that. I could be wrong. Maybe this does it itself. I don't know. But, you'll specify like your retention policy or how many you want to keep, all that good stuff, right? And then same as before, you know, you got your Discord hooks. You can do this on any era. So that's all fine and dandy, right? And then that's that. So now we're going to go ahead and hit submit. This should submit it without a problem. I want to say that now that since we had made the successfully made the connection, this did it make the folder yet? Or yeah, it did. See, as you can see, it made the folder. Theater V now. Okay, cool. So now let's go ahead and let's run the backup. Should be like it's almost damn near instantaneous since we don't have much to back up. So there it goes, backing up, and just like that, it is done. Boom. See, there you go, right? This is what it looks like when it's backed up. And then you're actually able to see in Snapshot Browser, you can see what was, you know, the specific files and stuff that was backed up. It got it in tree view, right? See, as you can see, it backed up the back me up folder, but didn't back up the other one. And then in here only backed up that text file, right? Not that BMP file. So we know the excludes work without a problem. Yeah. And that's that. And then here is also where you would also do your restores. So I mean, I think you could probably do, no, list view is just like, was basically the same thing. So just ignore me on that part. But, this is also where you do your stores. So like you could sit there and you can, you know, restore the entire directory, or you can restore like individual files. And remember what I mentioned earlier about like that, you know, where it was backed up at was being read only. So we can't back it up directly there. What we can do is if I sit here and I do a restore the path. So let me restore the path here. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, idiot me. I forgot this is inside the container. Yeah, right. So this is like, so, you know, you do need to make sure that you actually select the pathway that we was mentioning earlier, like setting up a pathway that you can like restore the files to, or you can just go back and what's the word I'm looking for? You can just go back and set it to read and write so that way it can actually back up those files back to wherever it is you need it at. Where is, I want to go to the container. Let me just go inside the container here. So just so you guys can see that, let me go here inside the container and let me ls/tmp, see what's in here. There's nothing in here. Okay. So now let's go ahead and I'm just going to go back it up into TMP here. TMP /backmeup/file o.text. I don't like that it has all that extra stuff, but it's fine, you know. So let's restore, confirm, restore, and as you can see here, it restored it without an issue. So now if I just go back in here, like I said, we're just using this as just the, you know, the example, and there you go, right? As you can see, there go the folder. Me go there, and then boom, right? See, there goes the file. And then like I say, you know, you could have maybe there's a setting that you can use so that it maybe it chops that off. I don't know. Otherwise that'd just be a pain. But yeah, like there you go. There's actually nothing really much else to really go through. Yeah, it backed it up without an issue. And I want to say on the what is it? Oh, go over here, and I want to say that here you should be able to the see it here as well. Oh, sorry, wrong server. ls/theta-v, right? And then if I go to, I think it's what, snapshots? I want to say it's snapshots, right? Yeah, see, there you go. Yeah, see, there go the snapshots and what. Obviously you can't explore it. And I don't think the data thing has it either. So let me just make sure, right? Oof, man, look at that. Fantastic stuff. But yeah, as you can see, it's all working as intended. And that's that, right? So there we go, right? We just went through, just as a recap, as we wrap up this video here, right? We just went through creating our SSL certs, right? We made an SSL cert for the CA authority, which is important. You need this, right? And then we made an actual cert for the Restic, the REST server application itself. Like I said, if it's accessible at the same device, you can just use the one that you make for the device itself. And, you know, so we were successful in employing our mutual trust where both sides can trust each other. And yeah, and then we was able to then just set up the Backrest and then the REST server, right? Which, as you saw, it wasn't necessarily all that crazy to get into. And that's it. We're done. We are good to go now. So guys, thank you so much. And if there's any other further suggestions or videos you guys need, so I know, like, for example, like that, you know, making the making the Docker containers have their own IP addresses. You don't really see, I don't think I saw too much even information on it, so maybe that might be the next video I make. But, you know, just keep a lookout for any more additional videos I make. And you guys take care. Thank you so much for tuning in, and please, you know, put in some comments for anything I might have gotten wrong in my understanding, like especially for the CA certs or the SSL certs in general, because I'm still learning about that. And then of course any more suggestions on improvements or making a video better, do let me know. You guys take care.